Welcome back to another episode of Out of the Blank Podcast. Rob, it's a pleasure to have you back on the show. Usually our discussions aim a certain direction. It's always good talking about the Kennedy stuff. I'm telling you, man.
Yeah, well, that's pretty much all I do, Robbie. Thanks for having me back, buddy.
Do you get obsessed with it? Like, do you ever have to take a step back? I've talked to so many researchers that just have to take a step back sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, dude, I've quit my podcast like 3 or 4 times. Actually, just out of frustration and burnout, and just the need to get away from things for a little while. I mean, it does get overwhelming every so often, and you do get burnt out from it, looking at this stuff all the time. If you live it and breathing it, yeah, it gets old sometimes.
I got for my birthday, someone from work had gotten me a Jack Ruby where he's like getting interviewed and he's got that smiling grin on his face. It looks like he knows something. Someone had got that on a giant board, like a painting thing. So I have it hanging over my bathroom. And I'm like, yeah, maybe it's time to take like a little step back. I'm starting to collect a whole bunch of JFK memorabilia and stuff like that. But it is fascinating. And I think John Orr says it best. It's got everything you could possibly want. It's got mob figures. It's got, magic bullets. It's got government
Eyes.
corruption. Yeah, spies.
Mystery, the whole 9 yards. It's the ultimate murder mystery, and that it's never been solved to everyone's satisfaction. The lone nutters thinks that it was solved back in the 60s. And all of the researchers might have a piece of the puzzle, but they don't have everything. And of course, nobody can agree on everything. So we're still here doing our thing.
I mean, the 60th anniversary is coming up. I want to get to talking about, you're obviously speaking there, but was this your first like conspiracy? I mean, I hate using that word, especially when it comes with the Kennedy assassination, but does this make you more open to conspiracy talks or maybe certain government corruption stuff? Like I've had to look into the whole area of the 60s and 70s and just kind of keep an open mind about a lot of stuff that was going on back then that seems kind of crazy for our government to do, but now I just don't put it above them.
No, I mean, no. I mean, I was always open minded because, of course, I grew up in the 70s, and would see things, like these crazy TV shows like In Search of with Leonard Nimoy and stuff, and see the Bigfoot stuff and the aliens and this classic Egyptian stuff. And it was just fascinating to me. It was just very cool thing to kind of look into. You go to the library and be able to look up books about Bigfoot and or UFOs or abductions or crazy stuff, man. And of course, grew up with Scooby Doo. Watching the this crazy mystery cartoons and stuff like that, and it was always back of mind. And then as I got a little older and into the 80s and stuff, and I think I went over this, but I had to do a paper on Kennedy in high school, and in the course of researching the paper, you come across the assassination story because it's a big part of his presidency. And things just didn't sound right even back then. And then the movie came out, of course, JFK, Oliver Stone's movie, and then that throws you into a whole nother tailspin back then. And this is all pre-internet stuff, man. So if you were interested in this stuff, you didn't know anybody, or you didn't live close to Dallas, or you didn't uh go to the library and actively search these books out so you could read more about it. I mean, you were clueless. um and with the invention of the internet, it made things a whole lot easier to connect with other people and do research. So ever since then, man, it's been 35 years going strong now. So
Would you ever think that it was as complicated, when you first looked into it? I would have never thought that I would have been this obsessed with it, or at least, been talking about it. I mean, it practically controlled the last year of my show, just constantly. I mean, every single moment I was trying to find someone who was a Kennedy researcher to try and understand it more because there's just so much about it that you would never think of. The education system or my class when I first saw the Zapruder film junior year of high school, never you never would have thought that it would have opened up a can of worms into this.
yeah, I classify it like two different ways. So you have your casuals and you have your serious. And you see the casual researchers, if that's what you want to call them, um, but they read something and think they've solved the case and spout it all over social media. And you see things start to get recycled over time, like the limo driver did it, or the mafia did it, you know, and so on and so forth. And these things just keep coming back up and up and up. And it's like, okay, we've knocked this down like 3 times already, and here it comes again. But it's the casuals, but it's the more serious researchers who look below the surface of that conspiracy theory. Okay, so there's a broad conspiracy theory. Say the CIA did it. Okay, well, either that is a very broad statement or it's a very specific statement. If it's something like, okay, the CIA did it specifically, was it an officially sanctioned action by the CIA? And if it was, where is the documentation for all this? You'll never see it, ever. So, but then, if you start to get even more specific, okay, well, maybe it wasn't a officially sanctioned CIA event, but maybe there was folks associated with the CIA who kind of went rogue on their own and got involved in this plot because they felt that it was in the best interest of the country. Okay. Well, then you need to dive down on that even more. Well, you know that they didn't do it themselves. They used cutouts. So then you have to dive down even further, another layer. So there's a big difference to me between a serious assassination researcher and a casual. You see these casuals come up all the time. Oh, they put a pillow over Jack Ruby's head after he shot Oswald. What's that mean? Was it really Ruby? You know, Stuff like that. It's just people could waste their time and treading water and about the magic bullet and tippet witnesses and all this stuff and the medical evidence, stuff you'd never be able to figure out.
I would consider myself more of a casual researcher only because I'm just trying to get the public in on the discussion. Because I think once you start looking at it more from the top layer and actually look inside of it a little bit, people will all see that there's something going on here, whether it's a red flag. Now, I do think it's kind of the military industrial complex or what I would call the CIA, but I don't necessarily know if I still believe the same as, I guess, what I thought before, which was that the CIA orchestrated this grandmaster plot. Because I don't think the people that did it are the same people that covered it up. I can look and show you a lot of things that were Dallas police error issues, witness statements that obviously talked about, like, there's a witness statement from a cop. If you look at the History Matters, the DPD records, and it was a person seeing someone approach or go up the ramp to the police thing and gave a description of the guy, but nobody stopped him. He just went inside. He wasn't allowed to be in there. Whether that was Ruby or not, the person or document doesn't say. But the guy, there's a testimony that says that, and nobody bothered to pursue that down. I mean, even with the Texas theater, they were looking for a certain individual, not for killing the president, but for killing a Dallas cop. Like, there's a lot of Dallas police error that was covered up. Now, whether that's for something that nobody wanted to pursue to get Dallas police in trouble. But for me, it was just about trying to find all the faults and all the issues, which doesn't sound like proper for our government to handle a certain scenario of this matter. And there's plenty of that, whether it's destruction of evidence or, disappearing evidence or, saying that you got the killer of the president within 48 hours and eliminating the possibility of a getaway driver. Like, there's these certain things that I feel like if you just mention to people, they go, what? And they kind of like raise their head a little bit. So that's my interest into it, is just trying to get the public in on the discussion. But you hit more of a serious flow with things. You go inside, you look at documents, each episode of yours kind of analyzes an individual aspect of it, whether it's the curtain rod issue or just some statements. I mean, I trust your opinion overall, I appreciate you being a serious researcher.
Yeah. Like I said, going back to, you did say a lot. Going back to the, like Ruby in the basement, being able to shoot Oswald, and the ineptitude of the Dallas police. Even prior to that, Ruby was in the police station acting as or pretending to be with the press, asking questions. He had, his glasses on, his little notepad and stuff, and you see him kind of stalking Oswald all weekend. So, and look, back in the early 60s like that, it wasn't too terribly hard to impersonate a member of the press. You know what I mean? And there was a lot of press in the basement of, during Oswald's transfer. So it's not out of the realm of possibility that, he snuck in there with his nice suit on and his fedora hat, and posing as a member of the media. You have cameramen, you have sound guys, you have reporters, you have all these technical people. I mean, it was pure chaos down there.
But he
And
had to be identified, right? Because he did correct somebody on the Fair Play for Cuba committee.
well, Henry Wade knew. I think Henry Wade figured out who he was after the fact. He was aware of this person named Jack Ruby, but he didn't know what he looked like. And that was when Ruby corrected him, when he said something about the Fair Play for Cuba. And but nobody identified him right then and there. This is after the fact. When you're looking back at pictures and stuff like that, when you see him in the hallway, these movie little news clips and stuff. But to your point, I think a lot of this ineptitude of the Dallas police, the ineptitude of the FBI, because nobody wants to look bad in the eyes of the public and the world. I mean, you have the eyes of the world on you. You don't want to look like a bunch of Keystone cops. The FBI didn't want to look bad. They never wanted to look bad. In fact, Hoover, used to get pissed, if the FBI was ever made to look bad. The FBI always got their man. You know what I'm saying?
Well, they influenced movies, Hoover's G-Men. They invaded Hollywood to try and make sure that they can manipulate the way that the media was portraying the FBI to make them look like these superheroes. Like, I think the rule of thumb was the bad guys can shoot as much as they want, but they have to miss.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. 1,000 bullet holes in the car, but he's all right. But yeah, it was a lot of it was ineptitude, and it was cover your ass mode and cover things up. All of the things you did wrong, cover it up. And the same applies, to the Dallas police, the FBI, the CIA, the Secret Service, you name it. People were in cover your ass mode, and hey, don't look too closely at this mode because you might see something. So of course, the cover up is going to be different than the actual crime. And just because you're covering something up doesn't mean you did something wrong. Uh, or well, you may have done something wrong, but you may have not actually been part of committing the crime. But you need to cover up the fact that you were inept at your job and maybe you didn't do everything you could have, type thing. So a lot of that. And a lot of people confuse the cover up with the conspiracy, and think that just because there was a cover up, that they were part of the conspiracy, but that's not necessarily true.
When it comes to who might have did it, I'm not going to ask you really who did it in case you don't know, but if there's, I mean, I don't know either. So it's a mystery for 60 something years now. But do you think all these people that say it was this person or it was James Files or is any of these types of people, I mean, that's not, it's not that it's misinformation, but I feel like half of these people don't believe some of those things as well, too. I mean, you join TikTok. I'm on TikTok. There's a bunch of people on TikTok. Just type in the hashtag JFK. You get all of it. You get the craziest videos I've ever seen that people mash things together. And just like you were mentioning about kind of social media going this way, I don't know if these people actually believe that, but for them, I don't know if it's a good way to get clicks or something like that. But stuff that's like, I just watched a video where a guy said that, I think one of the guys part of the education forum, but he talked about that JFK was killed because of UFOs and trying to release that. And I was like, hang on a fucking second. Like, there's a lot of reasons that JFK was probably killed, but the UFO one, that you're just grabbing at like air.
Well, not really. Not really, Robbie. There are documents dated November of 1963
I
that
don't
have.
think he was killed.
No, I'm not saying he was, but there's more than air there. There is something to grab onto, but and it is interesting. The documents are interesting when JFK is asking the CIA, hey, basically, are UFOs real? What the hell's going on with these things? Type of thing. But yeah, it's crazy. Like I did a show about a TikTok that a listener had sent me about and it had to do with Mandela effect, which I'm sure you're aware of, in the Kennedy assassination. And this person swore that the JFK limousine only held 4 people that day. It had a front seat and a back seat, 2 drivers up front, and Jackie and JFK. No Connollys, no jump seats, no 3 rows. And they're saying this is a Mandela effect.
Oh, I think I watched this episode because one of the ones in the museum or whatever, it was in the video. I don't know if it was your podcast episode or what I saw. The one showed only 4 seats, and one of the museums are replicas, and that's not right. There was 6 because he had to think Connolly and all them. Yeah.
Well, even back then, I mean, now to duplicate the JFK limousine, you know, to be an exact replica, it costs a lot of money because you have to cut it, stretch it, add a door, add jump seats, and all this jazz. So when these like crappy Ripley's, believe it or not, museums or whatever they are, you know, want to show something like that, they can't reproduce the limo. They can reproduce the Lincoln, the original Lincoln that it was based off of, but that was basically a 4-seater car, you know, 2 rows of seats. So that's what people are seeing. And then they also, when they did the Secret Service recreation of the shots in Dealey Plaza, some photos of this got into Life magazine in 1964. And they did it with a totally different car, not a limousine, a 2-seat car, or a 2-row car with 4 seats. And they used a picture from, I think it was from his Houston trip instead of the Dallas trip. So that's what confuses a lot of people as well. You know, there's so many other photographic evidence from that day. There's so much other film evidence from that day. Just random people took, you know, standing on the sidewalk when the limo came by. There's all these other movies that we all know so well, like the Zapruder film and the Nix film, and then much more film, where you can clearly see the limousine has 6 people in it, and you know, it's not a Mandela effect. It's just you just don't remember correctly, and you're not interested enough to get the facts straight or even look into it enough. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
this casual thing, you know.
Do you think the Zapruder film was altered?
Whew. It's hard to say. I mean, there's parts of it that make you scratch your head, you know, when you're looking at the background. And, you know, these nice colorized, stabilized versions that we have now, this is not the original film. You know, this is something that people have manipulated um, to create basically the clearest, colorized, stabilized version so we can study it more. You know, if you go back to the earliest and try to watch like the earliest copies of the Zapruder film, they almost, I don't even know if they were black and white or if they were so faded in color that they looked black and white. And very grainy. You know, it's something totally different from what you see now if you were to look up, you know, on YouTube, you know, there's a Zapruder film now. So it's definitely been manipulated from its initial thing. But as far as it being altered back then, I have no idea.
Do you think it's weird that a lot of people only know, if they know about the Kennedy assassination, they only know the Zapruder film? But when you mention there's like 10 other films out there, and I know some of them they don't show as much as, like, obviously the Zapruder film shows like the real stuff. That's like the best one. But there's still other films that I find interesting when you watch them, like the guy who stops filming and but he looks up at the window and then his camera runs out of film. Like, to me, that's just fascinating stuff. I mean, you get the whole build up before and then obviously the after, or you get like I maybe a piece in the middle or something like that. But there's like 12 other films out there that people have never even heard of. They've only heard of the Zapruder film.
Yeah. You know, the Nix film shows basically the same thing that the Zapruder film does, but from the other side. And a lot of these news guys are riding in the follow-up cars, um, and they were catching good quality video. As they're coming through the motorcade. That's where you get the like the Darnell film and things like that. These people that were professionals and not just bystanders. But bystanders, did take some good films in the plaza that a lot of people don't even know about. So, and like one of the things that I've been looking into for the past year and a half, and we're going to be doing in Lancer, just so happens we're looking into people named Martin with the last name Martin. First name start with J, or a J in their name or middle name, something. And we're up to like 25 people now that are associated with the assassination in some form or fashion that have the initials J in their name, either first or second name, and Martin. And looking at that, I didn't even know going into it until I started looking into it. There was a guy named John Martin Jr. who made a film in Dealey Plaza and also filmed up on the knoll. I had no clue, never seen the film before. And he worked at the postal annex, and he was standing on Houston Street, right there at the corner of Houston and Main, and he followed the limo as it turned the corner onto Main Street, or I'm sorry, onto Houston Street, and started going up towards the school book depository. And if this guy would have been closer, he might have caught, the window. But before the limo turned, he turned his camera off and went over through the grass, I guess, to get a better angle. And then, the shots rang out and all that stuff. And then everybody was going up to the knoll area, so he went up there and started filming. I had no idea, but that's just the kind of stuff you just start looking into things and learn all this new stuff.
Why so many people with the initial J, but then last name Martin?
You know,
Like, we talking about like somebody using a cutout name or a copy name?
not necessarily. I mean,
Like,
some of them
there's
could
30
be.
people in the CIA named Lynch, and I'm pretty sure that's not their fucking name, unless the CIA is just hiring people named Lynch.
Yeah, it's something we kind of figured, just from looking into this, that Martin as a surname is like it's like number 20. So it's like a middle of the road last name. Okay. Like the number one last names in the United States are like Smith, Brown, Johnson, Jones, this kind of thing, right? So the probability of having a lot of people with the last name that are in the top 10 is a pretty good bet. But then you start looking at how many people associated with the assassination have the last name Brown.
All of
I
them.
don't know. I don't know. Yeah, there's some Johnsons. Yeah, there's President Johnson. There's a guy Johnson in New Orleans. Other than that, couldn't tell you. There's some Jones, Jones Printing Company in New Orleans, but you don't have 25 like you do with the Martin surname. So if you're going to create a cutout or a alias, you don't want a very popular name, because then it just doesn't look right. But you don't want something so obscure that it stands out, like Zabrowski or something like that. You don't want to be memorable either way. So Martin is kind of a middle of the road, not too common, not too obscure last name. And the fact that there's 25 of them associated with the assassination in some form or fashion, even if it's tangential, just from looking at all this stuff, it's like, oh, okay. But then you start diving deep. Like a good example is Jack Martin. Okay, Jack S. Martin, in New Orleans, the guy that got pistol whipped by Guy Bannister, the guy that dropped a dime on David Ferry right after the assassination happened. his name, Jack S. Martin, is an alias. His name was Edward Stewart Suggs, his real name, but the Jack Martin name was an alias. And but you run into um, several other people using a name Martin as an alias. So you have Lewis McWillie, one of Ruby's buddies, using that Lawrence J. Martin as an alias. You have Eugenio Martinez using that name as an alias. I think he was using Jack P. Martin and Jack N. Martin as aliases. So, but then you have legitimate people named Martin thrown into the mix. Like you have the John Martin Jr. guy that we talked about earlier, the filmer in Dealey Plaza. There's another guy, John T. Martin, who was from Minnesota, who filmed Walker, and then he filmed Oswald in New Orleans on the same reel of film. And then you have James Herbert Martin, who was Marina's like babysitter right after the assassination. You have James Martin Thorne, who was Marina's lawyer.
The biggest fucking family I've ever seen.
Yeah. So, it just goes on and on and on. It's like, wow, then you do deep dives on some of this stuff and it gets crazy.
Do you think it was not really a misinformation thing, but do you think that was a way that the government was trying to make it even more clouded so it's hard to investigate? Like, do you believe that there is like obviously there's things like I don't know if you believe John Armstrong and the whole dual Oswalds and two different people. I believe someone was using his name. I don't necessarily believe the whole like there's two identical like Oswalds, but one that was in the military and one that wasn't. I don't know. Maybe I just don't have all the evidence on it, but there's a thing like his jaw looking a little bit different. I mean, he could have had a tooth infection, man. That'll increase your jaw a little bit. You know what I'm saying? Like an abscess or something like that. So it's not so much for me where I'm like, I don't know. That's like the Zapruder film thing. I gotta be like, I'm not gonna fight that fight. But I definitely think someone was using his name, was shooting hay barrels and shooting at targets at a firing range of other people, saying this is what he was going to do to the president. So I definitely think that there's obviously some misinformation, or someone was going around saying I'm Lee Harvey Oswald and all this. But with the amount of names of like that are in Dealey Plaza at the time or just around that area, do you think that's like a way that the government could have maybe put in some misinformation into the case? Because there's a bunch of red herrings in this whole thing. If you really look at it, some of these will chase you down on pursuits for 30 years, 40 years. And I've seen and spoken to people that have gone down this whole aspect. And then you get into something where like they end up saying Israel did it. And I'm like, nope, fuck off. No, I'm running off on that one. I get there's like a lot of Israel like documents that point that direction, but there's a whole thing. I'm not touching on that aspect of things. But everyone that has their own research or investigation into the Kennedy conspiracy or the assassination, they do come with a lot of information to support their case. So it's like you could honestly take the guess who or pick whoever you want in this whole matter because they all have so much. And I have to think that that's got to be some type of tactic. Where is it not pointing to? Who is it not pointing to? And that's where you start looking in. And the one that I've seen the least amount of evidence on that seems like a lot of researchers try and go after is the CIA or is something like that. Because then it gets into then who are the individual names, and everyone you look up that goes down to they're dead. So it's like you're not going to get anything from that.
Yeah, I agree. You look at somebody like the Mafia. Okay, the Mafia is used to taking things into their own hands at a very much closer range than a sniper. Normally, you don't have a Mafia sniper. You know what I mean?
No, they do what they did to Roselli. They put you in a barrel and chop you up.
Right. They do shit like that. They waste you out coming out of the steakhouse and, broad, just,
Damn, right in front of the Applebee's.
yeah,
So
they want you to know who did it. You know what I mean? It's not like you're using this mysterious sniper who, comes and disappears and then the end of the night you never knew who they are. So, but then the question is, okay, well, who paid the sniper? Did the Mafia pay the sniper? They have a lot of money, but so do a lot of other people. So, the extreme right wing is heavily financed back then. The Mafia has a lot of money. Um, a lot of these anti-Castro Cuban exiles and anti-Castro Americans, they were raising a lot of money back then to fight Castro. Um, and they were going on, around the country doing these speeches, meeting with private citizens who had a lot of money, who weren't afraid to whip out their checkbook and write a check. So, it just comes down to ideology and money for me, you know.
You find it hard, like with some researchers, obviously everyone kind of puts their own political bias into it a little bit, depending on if you think that the mob did it or this did it. I've noticed it's like either conservatives, it's liberals, it's all this, and it kind of gets a little bit difficult to understand. You've interviewed researchers as well too, as much as I have. I'm just curious if you came across some of the political bias. Like, do you believe the whole like Castro was innocent and all this? I've seen a lot of people trying to fight that fight of Castro's innocent. We shouldn't have been over there. I agree we shouldn't have been over there, but I also don't agree that he's innocent. I think that obviously there's evidence to show that he was pretty bad to his people too, but that would get me in trouble with some JFK researchers because that's more of a, I don't know, that you would call that right wing, I guess, but I do believe Dallas was corrupt too.
Yeah, but you look at what Castro was doing over there, and nobody ever did a damn thing about it, ever, including us, including the Soviets, including anybody. Castro lived, and him and his brother lived a nice long life up until just recently. Within a couple years ago, when these guys managed to outlive and outsmart and outfox everybody. You know,
Well,
so
they only became a problem when they kicked everybody out of Cuba, the mob, the government. That's when we started seeing that the government was talking about Castro more propaganda. If you look, it went up more about Castro, and this threat of communism really started sparking out there, which honestly he was just reclaiming his land. I mean, kicking everybody out, but like I don't have a problem with that.
yeah, and you got to look at it too. Okay, the mafia and more so like the Traficante area of Florida, they didn't just have one interest in Cuba. Okay, they're like an octopus. They have multiple interests. So one arm gets shut up, cut off, and the other ones are still bringing money in. They're still doing okay. So even though, yeah, Castro kicked them out and they cut off a supply of money for them, yeah, it would have pissed them off, and yeah, they might have tried to take him out at some point, but it didn't work. So you move on. You're not going to waste your time and resources on this fight when you're already over here. All eyes are on you. When you can just move on to other things. It's just like Las Vegas. When all the gamblers and the gangsters and everybody were in Las Vegas, eventually it came time for them to go, and they had to clean up Las Vegas and get them the hell out of there. And now where's the mafia now? I don't
Yeah,
know. I don't know.
the mob thing gets difficult because there's like a bunch of documents you can read where apparently someone was having a conversation of a car ride talking about you missed this big event or something like that. I don't know if you came across that, but I've heard it briefly. I've never chased it or pursued it very much. But Blakey, when I spoke with him, he obviously is convinced that there was a mob thing going on, but he also has this kind of slight that the CIA withheld documents from them, which they did. Now, whether they want to call it national security or something else, it's important that we're on the mob subject. First of all, I don't believe the mob necessarily did everything. Like, you can't try and mess with an autopsy. That's something a little bit higher up than the mob. But like I said, separating the people who did it with the people that covered it up. But one of the films coming out this year is David Mamet's, and that is focused on that the mob did it. I mean, there's 4 films, I think, coming out about the Kennedy thing this year. So I'm curious, do you think that popular culture is doing more of a, even, I wouldn't say podcasts, but social media like TikTok, stuff like that? Do you think it's making it even harder to understand the Kennedy assassination, or do you think it's playing an important part in keeping it alive?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think it's always important, no matter what the subject is, as long as it has to do with the Kennedy assassination. It's important to have it out there. because it's a reminder that it happened, or else, you forget history, out of sight, out of mind. But on the converse, when you have all these movies coming out, of course it's a movie, and a movie has to be entertaining. you know, it has to be gripping. It has to have a good story, good characters, action, and you take Mafia. I mean, they're the source of some of the greatest movies that we have in Hollywood. Just look no further than The Godfather, Goodfellas. These are great movies. Um, because they're a joy to watch, because they're entertaining, because they have great characters, because they keep you enthralled in the story. So, how accurate would it be, for Hollywood to come out with a story of, you know, rogue elements of the CIA did it, like the executive action movie in the early 70s. You never got another movie like that after that. I mean, Oliver Stone's a little bit, but it was very not overt, but kind of covert. Um, and I just think Hollywood sees a good story. They see, okay, there's a mafia angle that always sells. And if we can get good characters, big name actors, it's going to make money. That's what they make movies for. They make movies to make money, bottom line. So that's what it can do. But I also think that it can, even though it might not be accurate, um, as far as what actually happened, if it can get people interested in the case, then great.
I mean, do you think that the public would be interested in something that was more factual based, just sticking with what we know and has been proven for 60 years? Like, I get the Hollywood thing, it's what sells. But for me, I don't know. I don't appreciate that as much. When they really try and glamour it up. I think Oliver Stone's JFK, I've never seen it, but I think it's important because it did establish the Assassination Records Review Board. That's like, I mean, the end payoff of a film. Fuck the check. That's awesome. But I know there's a lot added into it that was kind of Hollywooded up and necessarily wasn't true, which I kind of look at it from, like, I think the public, especially the amount of documentaries that are trending on Netflix all the time now, that a lot of people would be interested in just being like, tell me what the facts are. Like, no matter, I don't want any bias included in it.
Yeah, that'd be great if there was a movie like that. But then you look at like the assassination and Mrs. and Ruth Payne, or whatever that movie was, just came out
Yeah.
not too long ago. It's a slow burn, man. Yeah, you might be able to get it on Amazon or whatever. And I just saw the guy is actually having a showing in Middleburg, Virginia, which is like a half an hour from where I live. It's right outside of DC. And he's having a showing of that movie. And actually, the Kennedys used to have a house right in Middleburg, Virginia, and it's not a very big town. And I didn't even think that they had a theater, so I don't know. They might be showing it up against the wall of the.
Are you talking about Max Good's film? Oh yeah, that was a good film.
Yeah, but I'm saying how much exposure did it get? It didn't get like Hollywood exposure. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? And I don't know how well it did. You know, but and not to poo-poo the film, but something like that is what you're talking about. Do we want more of? Again, it all boils down to how much money is this movie going to make. Nobody makes a movie just for morals and posterity. You do something to make money, and whether it's factual, whether it's documentary style, whether it's Hollywoodized in some form or fashion, that's what it all boils down to. And to me, any of those categories are great for any of it coming out. Let it all come out. People can go see what they want. They can be entertained or they can be enthralled. And, hopefully it just gets more people interested in the case. Bottom line.
I mean, does it get like we had the recent Secret Service, or the day we're recording this is when it happened, but his book is coming out and he completely changed his statement after 60 years. It's a lot like Buell Frazier. and then kind of changing his, that, you know what I'm saying, right? Like that's, I don't want to say he's doing it because of his book coming out, but it's like, where were you the other times and all this? And I wouldn't, I'm not going to call this person out, but there's a person in the RFK assassination that took photographs. I think we both know who that is. But he's not, he flipped his opinion. When I talked to him on the phone, he was like, these other people took me out of context. I'm not a conspiracy theorist at all and all this, even though there's hours of content of him talking about how there was a grand massive conspiracy. But then I find out he's got a book coming out. That's the opposite of what he's been saying for however long. So I go, I get the money aspect. I know people are trying to do whatever, but to me, that's just a big disservice. So, I mean, when it comes to your thoughts, I mean, what are your thoughts on the bullet being found in the limousine that was crushed up? That goes with John Orr's work, but I also think, he's got a book coming out. Like, I don't know why he chose now to speak up 60 years later.
Yeah, we're talking about
Paul
Secret
Landis.
Service agent Paul Landis. Yeah. Um, it's I can understand why he waited this long to speak. I can see both sides of the coin because this guy was, I think he was like 28 years old when the assassination happened. Okay, he's riding on the sideboard of the follow-up car on the rear right hand side. So if there's shots coming from the depository window into that limousine, he is right under the line of fire, basically. And your job is to protect the president and his wife. And shots ringing out in the plaza. You're on the back of this car, and you turn around, you hear the gunshots, and you see the president's head blown into a million pieces. The worst thing that could ever happen. And there's nothing you can do about it. So I could see how badly this would affect this guy mentally, because in the article it did say, I think he managed to work maybe 5 more years in the Secret Service before he just had to quit, because he just said, he would relive that moment every day for years and years, and it just haunted him. Very hard to sleep, very hard to live. And so then he just went into being, a carpenter or a house painter or whatever he was. He just forgot everything. He never read the Warren Report because he was there and they didn't interview him. Shocker. So he just basically was done with it after that, and didn't even. So I can understand why wait all this time, and that maybe recently he realized that maybe something that he did might hold a little bit more weight than he realized at the time. About putting the bullet on the stretcher. So I understand both sides of it. And Clint Hill and is in the article as well, poo-pooing his story, saying, well, this guy didn't say this stuff back then. Now all of a sudden he's coming out. I get it. That's an easy way to poo-poo this guy. But if he's being sincere, and at age 88, when he has this book coming out for the 60th anniversary, if this story is true, well, then it means a hell of a lot more than what people realize, because then there had to be more shots or more shooters than just one. There had to be. If this one bullet went a little bit into Kennedy's back and then popped back out and went into the seat cushion, and that's why it looks like it did, well, then where are all these other wounds? You got to explain 6 other wounds now in the president and Connolly.
Well, I just don't like the people that defend the magic bullet theory. To me, just doesn't make sense. And I have people go, "Oh, well, where's your ballistics credibilities?" I was like, "Well, just look at the actual bullets, or listen to the phone call with J. Edgar Hoover and Johnson, where when Johnson asked for any shots fired at me, and Hoover says three shots, they were all fired at President Kennedy. Well, we know that there was the James Tague bullet that's straight off and hit a curb and bounce and hit him in the cheek. That 3 bullets goes into 2, and that creates the magic bullet theory. An investigation is done by people, and people make mistakes. The conspiracies, whether those mistakes were on purpose or not, doesn't mean that you orchestrated the plot or anything like that. But I consider you as bad as the person who might have took the shot because of the fact that they doubled down on their lies and this idea of blaming these people for whoever was speaking out about it, calling them a conspiracy theorist. I mean, you talk to people about the Kennedy stuff and they roll their eyes and do that conspiracy talk nonsense. I was like, you know what's conspiracy? Read the church committee report. Find out that the government showed a goddamn heart attack gun in a live courtroom in front of everybody. And everyone's, the one dude's going like this with his nose, like going like this at the end tip of his nose, because he's trying not to laugh because of how insane it is that a guy is holding, Frank Church is holding a gun with a giant scope on the top of it that can put someone in a cardiac arrest between 25 and 38 hours. That's nuts. That I would have called a conspiracy. But then you get to the Kennedy stuff. I mean, where do you find people's eyes glaze over when you start even mentioning it? I mean, I'm sure you don't go around being like, hey, but if someone starts talking about the 60s and maybe you sway the conversation a little bit into the 60s and then they start going, you know who my favorite president was? And you're like, oh, JFK was mine. And let me tell you about his death. It was wrong. I'm just kidding. But do you ever like come across somebody, at least it being brought up in the discussion or anybody asking you about it, maybe on the street or something?
Funny enough, you asked that because where I work, I was in this management class, and one of the icebreakers that they did that day was to write something about yourself that nobody would ever suspect that you're into or something like that. So I wrote up on the piece of paper. I said, I do a podcast, and I folded the piece of paper up and I put it in a hat, and it goes around, and so then they pull a thing out of the hat, and people have to try to guess who it is, right? So they pulled that out. I do a podcast, and everybody's picking all these other people out, and I'm just sitting there like, And the owner of the company and his daughter are in this class as well, and they're kind of running the class. So they asked me, "Oh, you do a podcast? What is it about?" Then it's that awkward thing. Okay, well, it's about the assassination of John F. Kennedy. And they're like, really? Well, that's fascinating. Very interesting. Who did it? Type of thing. And they were very nice, and I'm sure very I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, but
Good-hearted in their question.
yeah. And they're like, oh, how can we listen to it? And I'm thinking, oh, Jesus Christ.
Fucking Google it.
Well, no, I'm thinking, do I want these people listening to my show? Like,
100%.
I can hear the Silk City hot sauce ad in my head.
Oh God, Jeff, no.
As the owner is listening, you know what I'm saying? Like, oh my God. So, but I was like, yeah, I said, here, I'll shoot you a link. Feel free, listen. And I was hoping against hope that they never would listen. But then the owner of the company came back and said, yeah, I listened to some of your show. He said, very fascinating stuff, Da, 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 da. So very complimentary. They thought it was cool that I did it. So crisis averted, I guess. If they ever listen to like a whole show and I'm going off cussing about this, that, and the other, and talking about Jack Ruby just eating people in the back seat, like,
yeah, that's fun stuff.
Oh man, but yeah, crazy stuff. Whew.
I mean, obviously, a lot of people just don't want to get involved with it or don't even want to look into it because it's a lot. And there's a lot of information down there. But I mean, what would be your best selling points to get people interested into researching it or just getting over the conspiracy hump? Like, if you could give me not a 5-minute breakdown, but if you can give me let me just tell you, give me 2 minutes of your time, I swear, then I'll go away. Like, you have to let the Jehovah's Witness person in just to get like a cup of coffee, or they say they have to use the bathroom, and then you realize, crap, you just let them in your home. So now you're got to walk them out slowly. Give me that 2-minute pitch that lets me know I'm outside before I even know I'm outside.
Well, kind of like what I said before, it's true crime at its finest. It's the biggest And people don't actually think of the assassination as being a true crime murder mystery, but that's essentially exactly what it is. So, true crime is one of the biggest genres in podcasting, documentaries, murder. Everybody's always wondering who murdered who. Want to look at this, making a murder, convicting a murderer, murdering this, Jack the Ripper, Zodiac killer, all these serial killers, Ted Bundy. And, it basically boils down to, okay, this is a murder mystery. These people, the government says this is what happened and this is who did it. Okay. But if you look further into it, you realize that the government's full of shit. Okay. And you start to see things and patterns develop that leads you away from the official story. And it intrigues you to look further to see if you can try to figure out what the hell happened. At that point, you might not realize that maybe, a couple thousand people before you have tried to do the same thing as well. And, research this case their entire lives without figuring it all out. But that's the fun of it. You always want to think in the back of your head, man, it'd be crazy if I was the one that broke this case wide open and finally, after all these years, put all this stuff to rest. Of course, that's the narcissist in you, speaking. But the reality of it is, look, if I can just bring these things forward to people that they may not have ever heard of or known about, then it could definitely help other people who are researching the case put some pieces together, because one person can't know everything about the case. Penn Jones said, pick one aspect of the case and research the hell out of it. You know what I mean? And that's actually what I've been doing for the past year and a half, almost 2 years now. And that's what's kind of culminating at Lancer and beyond. So it's pretty crazy.
So you're going to Dallas to speak. First of all, can we meet up so I can hop a plane ticket? I'd like to go. I gotta go at some point. I mean, that's just the 60th anniversary is the big blowout special.
Well, I'm not going.
What?
I'm not going.
You zooming in?
It will be a virtual presentation.
Damn.
I will be there in spirit.
Dude, we got to go. We got to get go to one of those Waffle Houses at 2:00 in the morning and just talk about JFK shit.
I know. Trust me, I tried to make it happen this year. I just cannot get there this year, which sucks. Hopefully my partner will be there. I know Doug's going to be there. And I think Bart was going to try to be there, but I don't know if he can be there now. But there's going to be a lot of folks who are going to be in Dallas this year. And trust me, I wish I could be there for the 60th, but things are what they are. And, if I can't be there in person, it's still going to be an awesome presentation.
I have to ask, I mean, how did they approach you about doing the Lancer thing? Did David Denton reach out to you or any of whoever was in charge?
No. Denton's has nothing to do with Lancer. He's in that JFK historical group. Judith Berry Baker.
There's group. 80 groups I'm a part of. I don't even remember the names of anymore.
No.
Deborah did.
She used to be in charge of Lancer. Now it's Kenneth and Gabby Zediker. They're kind of putting things together down there. And Kenneth, they asked me if I wanted to do a presentation this year. So I said, sure. Why not? I could have done, I've been approached before to do it. I really wasn't. I just didn't feel like I had anything to offer, because it's a pretty big platform with some big swinging dick names sitting around the room. You know what I mean? And you don't want to go in there and shit the bed in front of all these people that you've, read about and respect and all of that, But this year I felt like, we've been looking into something for a while, and I think we got some new information, and it's interesting as hell, and might as well do it.
me and you have to go up with either when Bart, whenever he comes down or something like that. We have to go to the archives. We live so close to it and we've never been to the archive. At least I've never been to the archives.
Me either.
It's only a couple hours away, but I'm like, I don't see it. That's the whole thing too. Like even with talking to members of the Assassination Records Review Board, and they talk about going to see the archives. I mean, this is a really kind of important question I'm going to spin to, but you had mentioned before about people obviously spending 40 years, 50 years researching into something. Some of those people are no longer with us. David Lifton's a good example of someone that did great work for the Kennedy assassination. And now after 60 years, they stopped the document releases. And it brings up an even bigger question: is reclassification going to be an issue that we're going to have to experience as well too? Like, are the amount of available documents, could they just start sealing stuff back up? I mean, is it good to start screenshotting everything like most people do in these education forums when they start talking shit on each other? Like it's a really big issue when it comes to the documents not being released. I mean, whether it's important stuff, whether it's security issues, whether it's names, any of that type of stuff. I mean, what are your thoughts on them just saying we're not going to give you the rest of these documents?
Again, I don't think the truth lies in documents that we haven't gotten. I think any of those documents that ever said anything remotely uh, dealing with the truth like that of the assassination have been long since destroyed, deep six, whatever you want to call it. Because if the CIA has any documents that could possibly implicate them or any of their former employees in the assassination, that they would ever see the light of day, you're sadly mistaken. Um, that's the ultimate in the cover your ass mode type of thing. They might put on a good front, for the government's sake, and they give us some little things to wet our whistle here and there, But as far as that smoking gun document, never see it. Doesn't exist. And if it does, it's locked away and deep in the bowels of somewhere. You're never going to see it. As far as um, reclassification, I could kind of see, and I do believe some of it's happening already, where things were released and now they've been re-redacted and things like that. Um, that's why it's important for people like Malcolm Blunt, who pretty much lives at the archives or did live at the archives for months at a time. He would just grab everything he could get his hands on and make copies of it. He didn't even read half the shit that he got. You know what I mean? So he was just grabbing stuff out of all these files, copying it, throwing it in a folder, taking it away, and then he would go through it at his leisure and see what he had. And a lot of the stuff, like what Bart goes through with Malcolm's files, is stuff that Malcolm doesn't even know what he has. So when Bart goes through these files, he's looking at it. Basically, he's opening a treasure chest and not knowing what he's going to find. Like book outs, handwritten notes. I mean, that's a crazy find that wasn't out there before, that Malcolm had sitting in his folder for 25 years and he never knew it. So I think it's important for the people who have these documents that they got straight from the archives, like back in the 90s and early 2000s, to go through this stuff, get it online, get it in there. And a lot of it is, but a lot of it isn't as well. Everything's not online by a long shot. Mary Farrell's great and all, but it doesn't have everything.
Yeah, some of those links you click, they don't lead to anything. It's like a 505 bad gateway or something like that when you click it. Because I still want to know about the LHO Clinton incident where he got an interview at a mental hospital. I talked to David Montague, who worked for the ARB, about that, and he was like, I can't discuss that. And I was like, why can't you? You got the file, you've seen it, but it's not available on the Mary Farrell site for me to click into. So whether they reclassified it when he just can't talk about it, because he was looking at a list of things that has been submitted and pushed out there, and he's seen stuff that we haven't seen. They've had all access to all the materials. So I don't necessarily think there's a grand thing to it. But when someone who worked for them says, in my personal opinion, I left there thinking there's no way in hell Lee Harvey Oswald shot the president. I put a lot of weight in that. That is hearsay, but I still go, he saw the materials. I don't give a shit. That guy's word is God to me.
Yeah, yeah. And you think, okay, you had the Garrison investigation, you had the HSCA investigation, and a lot of those files aren't online. You got to go to the archives and dig to get this stuff. And a lot of it's out there, but a lot of it isn't. And, nowadays people take for granted the fact that, okay, people like me and you who have regular Joe jobs and, we have shit to do in our life. We can't just go to the archives and spend 2 months chilling there, just pulling shit out of them. And now they changed it all there anyway. So now you have to make an appointment to go and you have to tell them specifically exactly what you're looking for.
Like a filing a FOIA request. They fucked me on that one. I don't know the dates and times of shit.
That's what I'm saying. Who knows this stuff? I just want to go there and I want to say, all right, just start bringing them boxes out.
Yeah.
Give me a copy machine, bring me some boxes, and I'm gonna fill my duffel bag every day full of shit and leave, and I'll be back tomorrow. And just keep doing, and just see what you got after that. Because to sit there and look through everything in the archives, you're not going to get through very much. If you sit there and read everything that they bring out to you. No, you just need to do what Malcolm did, and that's just grab it, copy it, stuff it, and keep going, and then figure it out later.
I wonder if Malcolm trusts the archives as much. I don't really trust them. Like I even brought it up with Tom Samoluk from the ARB when he was on here. I just don't. I don't think you can trust them. I don't know what, because it's right connected to basically the government, right? So it's like can't they just walk in there and be like, we're going to take this back or take this box back for security reasons. And then if you talk to Gary Schoner, when he went there was like one agent that had to be there whenever he was looking for the JFK documents. Like he had to be there. And then I guess this guy wasn't there that day. And they're like, you can come back another time and we'll schedule you in. And he talks about, he's like, why don't you have other people that can be here while I go through these files? And they said, all right, yeah, sit there and we'll wait and we'll get someone to help you out. He waited 3 hours and the guy that called out because he was sick came in and watched him go through the files. And he was like, that guy should not have been there. That guy looked sick as a dog. I wouldn't even shake his hand. So why did it have to be the one guy that was monitoring it? So I don't trust the archives on the simple principle of that. I barely even trust half the stuff that's online as well, too, if it leads to the National Archives website.
Unless everything might be at the archives. Maybe not everything, but everything that they say is there. But it just might not be released to the public yet. And they don't want to give anybody something that shouldn't be released yet for whatever reason.
I want Jack Ruby's medical records. That's all I want.
Yeah, good luck with that.
300 something x-rays in a matter of 2 weeks. Can somebody explain that to me? That's all I want.
And 4 colonoscopies.
Yeah, that's fucking nuts. I have to ask about, because I mentioned the dual Oswalds thing. Do you believe the Oswald multiple lookalikes?
Not in the sense that there was 2 individuals that look so similar that one went by Harvey and one went by Lee. Okay. I just don't think that's right. But when you go back and you start looking at people, I think Larry Crayford, who was Jack Ruby's barman there for a little while, and basically his little bitch, they went a lot of places together, and a lot of people confused Larry Crayford as Oswald because he was young. He had the same. Most of these kids back then had the same kind of haircut. They wore the same shit. I mean, this is the early '60s. It wasn't like, there was a lot of fashion options and, people weren't wearing mohawks and blue hair and earrings and shit. A lot of people didn't even wear beards or goatees back then. It was clean shaven, hair. You look at Michael Payne, he looks just like Lee Oswald. Okay. He could have been confused for, people like John Thomas Mason, Jack Lawrence. And it could have been people that didn't even look like Oswald. I mean, Frazier kind of looked like Oswald in a way. Billy Lovelady kind of looked like Oswald in a way. But they're just young, clean cut guys with dark hair, cut a certain way, just wore their clothes, pretty shabby stuff back then, basic trousers and t-shirts or button-up shirts, nothing fancy. And but there was also instances of people using Oswald's name, like you mentioned earlier, in New Orleans while he's in Russia. They're trying to buy like these trucks to send to Cuba, and they're using Lee Oswald's name at this Ford dealership. Well, Oswald's in Russia, so it couldn't have been him, but yet somebody here is using his name. And then
That
you
to
have
test drive a car?
well, that was at the Lincoln Mercury dealership in Dallas right before the assassination. But yeah, somebody, supposedly Oswald didn't have a car or didn't have a license.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was taking lessons from Ruth Payne. But a lot of this stuff is to make the name Lee Oswald memorable beforehand. As okay, this guy's doing crazy shit. He's going, speeding around the parade route in Dallas in a car that he's saying he's going to buy because he's going to come into a lot of money real soon. Okay. Or you have some asshole at the rifle range shooting at other people's targets. I'm Lee Oswald. I'll shoot whatever target I want to shoot. Okay, whatever the case may be, you're making this name memorable, and it doesn't even have to look like him. It's just after the fact, people in their brains kind of connect. Okay, was it that guy? Could have been that guy.
Yeah, the Warren Commission, when they did were talking about Lee Harvey Oswald, they said he was discharged from the military. They made it kind of seem more like it was a mental thing rather than what it was, when she was just let go from the military, had to go home.
Yeah, his mom took a candy jar to the face.
Yeah.
But yeah, things like that I think is more right before the assassination was to make him memorable. And I think Larry Crayford got mistaken for Lee Oswald in a lot of these places where the people said they saw Jack Ruby and Oswald together. It was really this guy and Jack Ruby. So
Do you buy the whole Oswald hated his mother thing? Or do you think it was just like how a kid says they hate their mother?
I don't think he did.
She
Deep
knew way
down,
too much about him to be like they never talked or anything like that, whether it was Marina feeding info or something. But
yeah. I mean, look, everybody's mother is crazy in some kind of way. You know what I mean? I mean, she was a single mother raising three boys, um, which I'm sure was hard to do. She even had to give um, the kids up to an orphanage at some point and then get them back. So, and they moved around a lot, and that's never good on a kid's psyche. I think they moved. I think he went to like 13 or 15 different schools up till 10th grade. So I mean that's definitely hard on somebody. And I don't know that of course he never knew his father, so I don't think he has a genuine hate for his mother. I mean that's his only basic parent. You know what I mean? So even the worst of times, you got to have some kind of an understanding about what your parent went through to get you to the point to where you're at. And maybe he didn't realize it when he was younger, but as he's getting older and comes back, because they did a lot of things as a family, with him and his brother, his mother.
his brother hated him. I know that much. But the mother, John Mancino, I can reach out to him to get him on your show if you want. He interviewed Margaret Oswald and got to know her personally for months during a lot of this. And when she died, she had left a note and documents that were supposed to go to John Mancino. And when he called the house to get the documents, Robert picked up Lee's brother and said, "You're not getting these documents." He goes, drop it. My brother did it. That's the end of the story. And then hung up the phone. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
look, I understand. I even understand Robert Oswald's perspective. Okay, you look just like the guy that just supposedly shot the president's head off. Okay, your last name's Oswald. Where are you going to go work? How are you going to get in life?
find a communist joint.
You know, to say you're taking your family um, out to dinner. You know, some assholes going to be, hey, aren't you that guy's brother that killed the president? You know, you got a wife, you got kids. Imagine his life after that. I mean, it's constantly, you got to constantly be watching your back. You know what I mean? Not just for retaliation, but just to protect your family. You know, and hopefully, you know, you're able to have a boss that's understanding enough to keep you employed with them and understand that you're not your brother. You know what I mean? So I'm sure he had a lot of pin up rage and resentment towards Lee Oswald and what he supposedly did. Um, but if you read the story about when Robert Oswald goes to the jail to talk to Lee after this happened, you know, it's a pretty low key conversation, and not really much is said. Um, you know, I think if you read Robert Oswald's book, you get a much better perspective on how he felt about things. Um, so just I think it's unfair just to classify him as pissed off at his brother and a dick and say, I can see where he would say, look, he did it. That's the end of the discussion. You're not getting shit. We're done. And I'm sure he never wanted to bring up the assassination ever to anybody after that, because it brings up all those bad feelings and just bad thoughts and bad vibes, and there's just no good there, you know, to come of it. So a lot of these no nonsense guys back then, that's the way they handled things. It was just, you know, forget it like it didn't happen and be done with it and move on. Try to move on, you know.
Yeah, I mean, it was more than just Kennedy that died that day. It was, you got Oswald that died 48 hours later, and then you had Ruby that died later on as well too. But I mean, if you really look at what was lost, I mean, people lost a son, people lost a father, people lost a brother. A lot happened that, even when you dig up like for witnesses and reach out to them or something, if you want to talk to them and just get some info, that's hard because a lot of people that were either there at Dealey Plaza or that were around it when it happened, even some of the Parkland doctors and people that did interview. I know there's a documentary coming out with some of the Parkland doctors. It's hard to relive that. And I didn't really truly understand it because you're just like, I just need to know what you saw so I could figure it out. But then you realize that it is kind of traumatizing for some of these people. They're reliving something that's probably the worst day of their entire life over and over again, much like we mentioned with Paul Landis. You mentioned leaving after a while, which I appreciate your perspective on Robert Oswald, because I'm going to have to read into his book to try and get his perspective, because everything I've read about him just seemed like he just didn't care about Lee at all, which makes it difficult to try and sympathize. But if he had different viewpoints, or kind of, you can understand his perspective, I can appreciate that.
Because if he didn't care about Lee at all, you know, he would never have anything to do with him. But they were always Lee was always visiting his brother. His brother paid for him to come back, paid his loan off, and come back from Russia. His brother let them stay at his house when they came back.
Didn't he pull out a knife though, or something?
No,
I thought Lee pulled out a knife or was carving something, and that's why he had to leave his brother's house the second time he came back with Marina.
oh, I've never heard that story.
Yeah, that's from Gary Hill's work, the other Oswald.
Oh, I don't know. I don't know.
I heard that. I was like, wait, so that's why? Because apparently that's when, before he went to the whole New Orleans thing, when he left there, he came back and went with Robert. And then there was some, like, Gary didn't go into it that much, but he said there was an issue with a knife, and Lee had a knife, whether he was carving something or something like that. But Robert told him he had to go. So, sorry, didn't mean to interrupt.
No, I don't know. The only thing I know about Oswald with a knife was when he was little. and living in New York. But yeah,
I still don't know who he is. Did he go to Mexico City or not? That's the main fucking question. I don't know that one.
yeah, probably not. It's he was probably impersonated there as well. Um, and you read the testimony of Marita Lorenz. I was just reading through that the other day when her HSCA testimony, and she swears to God that she met Oswald in 1960, 61 when Oswald was supposed to be in Russia. She's got him in Florida. And she's like, no, it's the guy. We called him Ozzy. And
Yeah,
but was it really him? Who knows?
she
But
met
back to
Ozzy
Robert
Osbourne.
Oswald. Yeah. But back to Robert Oswald for a minute, if you weren't getting along with your brother, okay, and he just supposedly shot the president, and now he's arrested and he's sitting in jail. Are you going to give enough of a shit to go talk to him and try to take care of his family? Or are you just going to say, screw that guy? He's made his bed, now he can lay in it.
Or show up to his funeral.
Right. There was a lot of stuff he was trying to do. As far as getting him a funeral, dealing with Marina and the kids and his mother and all that, trying to keep everybody together after that. And it just went to shit. Resulted in, Marina not ever letting Robert be an uncle to her kids.
Same with Margaret Oswald as well too. She
Yeah,
wasn't
she
allowed to
never
be
got to
grandma.
see her grandkids. So yeah, it's a lot of. I mean, it blew that family up pretty good. So I think it's always good to to keep an open mind about the perspectives of these individuals who maybe are tangentially affected by everything.
Do you appreciate the Garrison investigation, or do you think that it kind of, I don't know, went bad a little bit? I haven't really looked in so much into the Garrison's investigation of things, but I mean, from what I've heard from Margaret Oswald's words, from John Mancino telling me about it, or just documents and even interviews with her, I think she talks badly about Garrison in a couple of them. Mostly because she felt like she was being used. And that's why it became hard for her to try and speak or connect with reporters or people that wanted to look for the truth or something like that, as she felt like everyone was just using her for a story.
Well, as far as the Garrison investigation and her, um, Marguerite never really had anything to offer other than her feelings about things. She never had any proof that Oswald was anything one way or the other. They might have written a couple letters back and forth here and there, but there was no real, I can't see Oswald, confiding in his mother, about his personal feelings and his personal convictions and his political leanings, or the fact that he was an undercover spy or whatever you want to call it. She's just his mother, you know? And when it comes to the Garrison investigation, she really has nothing to offer to the case because she doesn't really know anything. Um, and in general, I kind of see it from two different ways. There's people on one side of the Garrison case that say that, Garrison was this um, narcissistic, maniacal, uh, homophobe, you
Is
name
that
it.
because of the Clay Shaw shit? Is he was trying to,
Yeah,
yeah, okay.
yeah. Like my friend Fred Litwin, he's written a couple books about it. And he sees things a certain way. I don't see them that way. I mean, but I understand why he feels that way, because there are certain documents out there that can paint things a different way. And when you are looking into some of these people that are connected in New Orleans, I mean, a lot of them are, for whatever reason, homosexual. An inordinate number, like more
David
than
Ferry.
should be. Yeah.
I didn't know he was an airline pilot or whatever the hell he was.
Yeah, he was. It just so happens that these people that are connected and in this city at this time with this thing, that they have this common bond, but it has nothing to do with the fact that Garrison is looking into the murder of the president. You know, David Ferry came on the radar for a reason. Clay Shaw came on the radar for a reason. So I think the world's a better place for the Garrison investigation. I think the research community is in a better place because it has so much more information to work through, and there's a lot of valuable stuff that Garrison uncovered. Maybe a lot of stuff that he ignored and maybe should have focused on a little more. But then you're being hypercritical of a man who was basically in an elected position, trying to do a very big thing, and there was a lot of forces trying to oppose what he's doing. And you're dealing with New Orleans in the early 60s, which was a very seedy place, port city, very seedy place. Lots of low lives, lots of scumbags, lots of con men. You had the Mafia there. You had the extreme right wingers there. It was just a murky, murky place back then. And to do what he did, my hat's off to him. He did not, I think, well, he lost the case, but, Clay Shaw was proved to be later that he was a contract agent for the CIA. So he wasn't too far off base. But was he a conspirator in the murder of the president? I don't think so. But that's just my feeling.
I have to ask about this is probably my final question for you, really about the JFK stuff. But when it comes to never mind, I just blanked out on it. Whoops.
Out
It
of the
wasn't
blank.
important. No, here we go. The Camelot thing, the theory of Camelot. Do you believe in that? I don't prescribe to it.
I don't either. I mean, I think it was a great idea after the fact, but at the time, it was definitely not Camelot. The closer you looked at, the president and Jackie's relationship at the time and what he was doing on the side and what she was doing on the side, and then you have the
What was she doing on the side?
same thing he was doing on the side.
Damn, she was too. Okay. I knew him. He was doing stuff on the side, and I know people get mad when you bring it up, but I didn't know she was.
Yeah, yeah. So that's just one of those things that don't embarrass me in public. Do what you want. I'm going to do what I want. Don't embarrass me in public. Type of things. Because she was not oblivious to what he was doing, and if he's doing it, well, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. You know what I'm saying?
It was that statement from Connolly's wife that got me to think something was going on there, which was when Connolly's wife was on the whatever interview, whatever it was, and on television, and she goes, when I turned around, I thought it was weird that I was the only one that was covering my husband, because Jackie jumped on the back of the limo immediately and started going backwards. And to me, I was like, I mean, obviously I'm overthinking it a little bit by going into it and speculating on that type of stuff. But to me, that was before I knew any of them were really having affairs. I mean, I heard stuff about the JFK and Marilyn Monroe, but that was about it. But when she says that, like, she cared about her husband, she covered her husband. I'm sure they cared about each other, but also her first instinct was to get the fuck out of the limousine. Jackie's was.
Well, yeah, her husband didn't have his head fucking blown off. You know what I'm saying? Like,
That's
he's
true.
just wounded. I mean, there's nothing you can do for when your husband's
I
head
don't know. I've
explodes.
seen that videotape. It looked like the bullet just went in.
Yeah.
I'm kidding.
I mean, as soon as Connolly got shot, I mean, he's headed over into her lap,
Yeah.
like that, like, protect me, you know. And there was nothing Jackie could do at that point. I mean, she was, down there, trying to, I think she might even had her hand on the side of his head, trying to look at him, see if he's okay, and then his head gets blown apart.
Yeah.
I mean, what are you supposed to do? It's a split second. You can't fault somebody for not acting in a split second.
Do you think uh there was a front shot? Like, do you prescribe to that?
I do.
I
I
do
do.
too. Do you think that I mean, what will that change the magic bullet theory? I mean, obviously that it can't exist if there's a front shot, but I mean, do you think the front shot came from like the South Knoll, like some people think? Do you think it just came from
I think it came from the grassy knoll.
okay.
The South knoll to me, um, there's just too much in between the South knoll and Kennedy. And I just did a show talking about the windshield of the limousine. How people said, "Oh no, it had a hole through it. It had a
Yeah,
hole
they said
through
you
it."
could stick a pencil through it or something like that. I've seen pictures of it. Unless I'm looking at a different one, it just looks like a chip. It looks like it. Yeah.
And it's on the inside of the glass, and then it splinters out a little bit. So basically, a fragment hit the window. Um, it was either bone or bullet or who knows what it was, but it
And
was just a
bounce back.
fragment of something. So, and so if it didn't come through the windshield, then you're risking hitting the driver, Nelly, Jackie, or any combination of any of that to get to Kennedy.
It had to come from the side where that's why the head went that way back and to the left. It's because it came from, so it didn't even need to hit the windshield. It must have just gone right by Connolly or whoever.
And you have so many people saying that they felt that shots were coming from the knoll that you just can't ignore it. I mean, it's up into like the 30s and 40s, 30 or 40 people, you know, who were closest to the limousine said shots were coming from the knoll. So it's kind of hard to ignore that. And of course, people will poo-poo it, say, "Oh, it was just the echo effect, and this, that, and the other. You couldn't tell where the shots were coming from." But you know, to me, that would have been the perfect place, and you could get away real easy.
When they remodeled the Dealey Plaza, when they put the new fence in, it was interesting to me that someone had written in Sharpie on the new fence saying the trees saw everything. I go, that's some dude who takes a lot of acid that gets the main message of this thing as well too, because that's a quote that should be solidified there. The trees saw everything. That's fantastic.
Yeah. Yep. And I just got Joan Mellon's other book. It's a biography on Jim Garrison, and she talks about Jim Garrison and interviewing Jack Martin, and he was going to name the chapter something like "The Man Under the Oak Tree," because there was some old analogy about wisdom and being imparted and living in these trees. And what you just said made me think of that, because the trees saw everything. They knew everything, they see everything, and they're here long after we're gone. You know, and if there was only a way for you know these trees to talk, we would know the truth.
I know
You know,
technology, get on that shit.
right?
For God's sakes, I can send a text message to someone halfway across the world, but yeah, we can't get a damn tree to talk to us.
I know. We can get
One
the
day.
chronovisor from the Vatican, and we can go back and see what happened.
Honestly, someone should look into the Vatican. That's a little bit more important. Rob, no, I appreciate the time you gave me to talk on my show, man. It's always a pleasure being able to chat with you. I also appreciate all the times we've talked in the past and also listening to your show as well, too. If I fall asleep listening to your show, for some reason it tosses me on the tinfoil hat show. I don't know why.
Hey, there's nothing wrong with the Sam Tripoli and the Tinfoil Hat podcast. I listen to it all the time myself. Love those guys. They get shit wrong about the JFK assassination
Yeah,
all the time.
Driver did. That's what they say.
Yeah, yeah. But other than that, it's a very entertaining show. I love Sam Tripoli as a comedian, and it makes me laugh, which I want to be entertained. I don't necessarily always need to be informed. Sometimes I just like to be entertained. So, uh,
But
well,
where
I'm in good company. If it's kicking you over there after me, then that's cool.
It's okay because people listen to mine and then they get tossed onto Theo Vaughn's, which apparently I have the same mannerisms apparently. But no, Rob, where can people find your links, man? Seriously, I appreciate what you do with your podcast, and I think it's important. I always recommend yours to anyone that really wants to dive deep into the JFK stuff.
Yeah, the podcast is everywhere. You can listen to podcasts, quick hits as well that I do with Doug. And all the socials are at the Lone Gunman 7. You can follow along. And also the Lone Gunman Podcast YouTube channel is, let's just say you might want to start paying more attention to it after the 60th. Something big's coming. So if you're not already subscribed, people, make sure you subscribe to get notified and ring the little bell and all that happy horse shit. You won't want to miss it. Something new is coming, something big is coming. So stay tuned for that.
And thanks everybody for listening to this episode of Out of the Blank. Stay tuned for our next episode.